Folks, thanks for joining us for another On the Limb podcast segment of Whitetail Weekly with Caleb Currents and Luke Humphreys. Take it away, guys.
Well, thanks for the intro, Mike. For those who don't know, my name's Luke Humphreys, and I'm one of Caleb's best friends. We've been hunting together for quite some time now, killed some good deer together, but I think he's going to leave this one up to me. He's got some stuff to do, so I came over, we're going to knock this out. But today we're going to be breaking down different phases of the rut. When bucks are seeking, looking, chasing, and then your lockdown modes, and then, potentially a second rut. Depends on what kind of areas you're in. Topographically, pretty much any deer hunter in today's day and age has so much information, sitting right in front of them. But, as a kid, growing up bow hunting, heck, I was bow hunting by myself when I was 12 years old, or with a compound bow just sitting up against a log jam, or sitting in the fork of a dead tree falling into a regular tree. Like, that's how I grew up bow hunting. But my brother and my dad taught me a lot, and one of the main things they always told me was saddles and other things like that. And it's what I was trying to say is, a lot of today's information's, sitting right in front of your eyes, and it doesn't take a genius these days to figure out, deer use saddles between two high points. So I really won't dive into that too much because these days it's pretty obvious. But like I said, we will talk a little bit about those phases of the rut and what happens during that. And before I get too much further, I'm not a professional at this by any means, but I will try to give the best information that I can out of this, and kind of where you need to place yourself and during those different types of phases of the rut, whether it be the seeking and the chasing, or the looking, or seeking and looking and versus chasing, and the lockdown mode, and then that second rut. So without further ado, I guess we will dive right into the seeking / looking phase. And places you really want to try to find yourself setting up based on the scenario Caleb has laid here in front of us. These are not real pins. These are just some stuff that Caleb has drawn up for you guys to look at, and some examples. So, you look here, you got a clear cut. And for those of you who don't know, clear cuts a lot of times, unless they're very, very, very fresh, there's not they provide a high stem count normally, with a lot of woody browse, and whitetails really like woody browse. And a lot of times those areas will tend to hold a good number of does, some doe family groups here and there, as Caleb has kind of put together here, and how to hunt those in that seeking phase. So, you got, like, let's start here. You got a doe group on the south facing slope of this clear cut here. And how you would approach that. So in that first week of November, coming out of the pre-rut into the rut, that's the time that we would probably call seeking and looking. He's looking for that first hot doe. It's probably about to kick off. So let's just go ahead and say November 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere right in there. You want to try to find a buck cruising from place to place in this. And a lot of times they're going to start doing it in the daytime, especially when we got good weather. If it's hot, they're still going to do it, but it's probably going to be a lot at nighttime. So the last couple of years, we've had some pretty hot weathers, unseasonably weather. So, but anyways, you want to try to find yourself in between these doe areas and accessing that correctly. So, you see a doe, pre-scouting would show you that, you got a doe bedding here, and you got doe bedding here, And it's good to go between, like, the early season and the pre-rut and identify these areas, because these are probably areas that does are going to stage up on. And who knows, there could be one off this point down here. This looks like a pretty good point to be on, too, for doe groups. And you could maybe slide yourself, on a south wind or in an evening set, get down low on this point right here and try to find something cruising from side to side. Swinging around these clear cuts is a good way to catch a buck seeking. They tend to just check every doe group that they know of, and that's kind of what they're doing right now. It's October 18th. Bucks will get up in the night And that's why a lot of times you get so many nighttime pictures, because that buck is, we're in West Virginia, so he's probably just going from corn pile to corn pile and figuring out how many does he has in his home range. And we see that a lot. So, but identifying where these does spend a lot of their time in the day is a big part of hunting that seeking phase, because you can get in between these areas in funnels. So obviously I mentioned saddles earlier, but these bucks will walk these big long ridges too, because the thermals will pull up these draws as the sun's coming up. So morning set, catching a buck cruising from doe bedding to doe bedding, this would probably be a good spot right here along the spine, right up this little drain, right about in here somewhere would probably be a good spot, depending on your wind. There's various spots right here in this little pocket that Caleb has made, but these bucks tend to walk those long ridges in the morning, going back to, they might have a bed somewhere down off one of these fingers, and he might have been coming off of this right here and walking across the top to scent check all of this in the morning, catching the thermals rising to the ridge tops. So finding yourself on a ridgetop in the morning is obviously classic, but being able to put yourself in a good position between doe groups during that seeking phase is probably a pretty good start. But that's pretty much it for seeking phase. I mean, you just got to spend the time in the woods. You got to get in there and figure out where those does are living at, and try to place yourself in a good ambush spot where your wind's pushing off a different way, and you make sure you have good access, maybe coming up this road right here, up this drain, and then popping out on this ridge. And let's say we've got a northwest wind here coming this way. Maybe you want to place yourself just off the bottom sides of this ridge right here. That way your wind may push down into this gully here. Just playing it smart, obviously that'd probably be a pretty good approach. It's something me and Caleb try to do ourselves, is try to, set ourselves in a spot where we have a good ambush point where we're pretty much bulletproof. And I'm sure Caleb's probably talked on that some here and there. When you get out of the seeking and looking phase, obviously you're getting into the chasing. And honest to God, a lot of those areas that I'm learning these days is getting halfway down off the mountain into some of these little bottom areas like this right here. He might be trying to run her down in this bottom to lock her down into this main bottom. So if you can catch like a big flat coming up off around the bottom like this, it's usually a good place, because bucks will push these does off their bedding areas down into these drains and around the sides of these mountains. So any bench at that point in time is really good to be on, especially during that chasing phase. Sometimes I find myself back in the areas during that chasing phase, the November 9th, 10th, 11th time frame, 8th through the 12th pretty much, is a good time to catch a buck chasing a doe. And I sometimes find myself back hunting areas that I wouldn't be in the pre-rut, just because they're not always just chasing up and down these ridges. A buck might cruise the ridge, might go from a doe that he had locked down or chasing down in here, and then he comes up around the side, checks this side, and bam, he's got her down in this bottom over here running around. So don't overlook bottoms in the rut either. Some people tend to do, some guys say hunt them high, watch them die, and that's pretty much true, but don't overlook little spots and little funnels like right here. I would not put it past a buck to chase a doe off the side of the mountain down into this bottom right here. Sometimes those does just get wore out and they go downhill. I feel like it's something not a lot of people talk about. But I mean, that's pretty much chasing. There's not a whole lot about it. You just got to be in the woods at that point in time, man. Find a good topographical spot and set it. Sometimes you might want to set all day, because he may have chased a doe and had her down in here and bred her and is going back to another one. So don't overlook that midday time frame either. Me and Caleb have both capitalized on great bucks in West Virginia around that noon time frame, anywhere from 10 to 2. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about it. I'm definitely not preaching anything new at this point, but just some experiences I like to share. Me and Caleb have both shown. But you get in that lockdown phase we're going to jump into now. A lot of people think the woods are just dead, and I mean, in a way they are, but bucks at that point in time have all found does, because a lot of times those does will go into estrus around the same time you have let's say you have 15 does in 50 acres. I'd be willing to bet 10 to 12 of those does probably come into heat around the same exact time. You have that doe that comes into heat first, and that's when everything's really exploded. And then by the time you get to the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, a lot of your does have queued at that point, probably within the same 2-day window. So you got a lot of does coming into heat, and you got a lot of bucks trying to breed all these does, and it can cause some boring times, but it's also not a time to look past, because what is on the other side is very much desirable, because you still have a couple does there that have it queued. That's why sometimes you get a good rut that first week of gun season, some late bloomers, as some would say, and you can find them coming back up off those does that they've had locked down, trying to find the next one, because they know not all of them have been bred. So you get a little cruising action come back around November 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, week of Thanksgiving. You still have a little bit of a rut kick right there. It's not all just, flowers there in the first week of November where everything happens. You definitely still have some does queue right around that 20th, 21st, 22nd time frame. So that's a good time to be in the woods and just repeating all the tactics that me and Caleb have talked about right here. Don't get too complacent, don't tire yourself out too much, because there's still some good hunting to be done. And I will touch a little bit on the second rut. For example, last year, don't overlook the second rut, because man, that December 7th through 11th, 12th time frame last year was absolutely lights out. On my property, I didn't hunt that much, but what I seen on my cameras was absolutely insane. I had a lot of does queuing last year, yearling does, queuing right around that first week of December time frame, or the does that weren't bred in that first cycle. They came back in the cycle about 30 days later. That tends to happen a lot in West Virginia in high doe density areas, especially counties like Lincoln County that have a lot of does. A lot of times you'll have that second rut that first week of December, because not all of them got bred. So I did want to bring that up too real quick, because that's something that you can capitalize on and repeat all of this again. It's obviously not as intense as what you would see the first week, second week of November, but if you're hunting a target buck, a lot of times he'll come back to those areas because maybe he knows there's a lot of does in there, and they probably all didn't get bred, and he was off, a mile or two this way over here somewhere. And now he's going to come back around his home range and try to find something else. It's definitely not over at that point. So don't overlook the lockdown phase, and definitely don't overlook the second rut. Sometimes it's a great time to still kill a great buck. Wouldn't you say, Caleb?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you talked about, the most important part, of that second rut is that buck to doe ratio in whatever county or area that you're hunting. I noticed that, I was hunting a spot, in Mingo County that had, several more does than it did bucks. And, that's when I was hunting the flyer buck, and it was lights out. I got trapped in a tree stand until 8 p.m. because bucks were chasing does all around me, and I wasn't about to blow deer out of that set because I, hadn't shot my target buck. And, he come in with another buck, and they chased does. We had a big storm front moving in, and they were just on their feet moving. I probably sat through 3.5 inches of snow falling on that big strip mine, and it was cold, but the second rut's nothing to be overlooked. So like I said, it's not as good as the first rut in a lot of places, but a lot of times you can catch your target buck. If you haven't killed him yet, you can catch him slipping trying to find that last doe. So that's a really good point.
All right, Mike. Well, thanks for having me and Caleb on here. This is the first time I've really gotten on here to talk a little bit. I've been pretty busy, and Caleb's been busy, and he just kind of kicks us off when he can. But he invited me out today so I could talk a little bit too. So, but anyways, as far as onX goes, we do have a code with Mossy Oak. That code's Mossy Oak 20 to save you 20% off a yearly or annual subscription to onX mapping. And onX has a lot to offer too, not just for hunting. You've got you have some key features like the off-roading feature. They kind of break it down into 2 or 3 different little tabs there. They have like an off-roading one. They have
country.
They have a backcountry.
Yeah, they have trout routes as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's something Caleb was actually telling me about the other day that I didn't even know about it. So, I guess they have a trout route is what you're saying?
Trout routes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, pretty much regardless of what you like to do in the outdoors, whether it's off-roading, riding side-by-sides or hiking, or fishing or hunting. I mean, onX has all of your, online mapping covered. We download these maps before we go into these big pieces of public land that we're hunting that don't have any service, and it really helps us kind of pick apart the terrain. Even, when we don't have service, we can go in and have a pretty accurate pin on where we're going and kind of know what we're doing. So make sure you guys check them out. And if I were you, I would definitely recommend getting a subscription. We've used onX exclusively pretty much ever, like forever, like ever since they've been out. So I know it's been a game changer for us, scouting. When we were on Boone Ridge, we knew exactly where we were going to go look before we even went.
We made a plan and we went in there and made it happen.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Well, that pretty much concludes this week's segment of Whitetail Weekly. Make sure you tune in. We do have one more segment that'll conclude our Whitetail Weekly. We're trying to get these episodes out ahead of time. Obviously, we're wide open pre-rut right now, but we're trying to get these out a week or 2 ahead of time, so that way you guys can kind of prepare for the next stage of the deer season. And the next one, after the rut, and the second rut is going to be, post-rut recovery in late season, and that's going to be a big one for food sources and stuff. And that'll be pretty straightforward. But thank you guys for listening in, and stick around to listen to the last segment of our Whitetail Weekly.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Do you want the true Western hunt experience? Book your hunt of a lifetime today with Highland Outfitters, LLC. Located in Highland, Wyoming, 50 miles west of Casper. Their location in central Wyoming gives you access to some of the best hunting areas in the state. Highland specializes in archery hunts for elk and antelope. Their operations include Wyoming, Texas, and Africa. Highland Outfitters employs some of the finest guides in the business. All guides are licensed by the Wyoming Board of Professional Outfitters and Guides. No matter what the species you decide to hunt, you can count on your guide giving you 110% of being the true professional guide from start to finish. Book your hunt today at 307-797-3311 or 307-797-3312. Visit them on the web at highlandoutfitters.com. With Highland Outfitters, you will get the true Western adventure.